Okay, so you want to own a private hospital, buy the building, hire the doctors, fill the beds, bill the insurance, and watch the money come in. Here's the first number that should stop you. In 2024, the median American hospital ran an operating margin of 4.9%. That was a good year. And in May of that same good year, 40% of hospitals were losing money. Meanwhile, Medicare, one of your two largest customers, paid 83 cents for every dollar you spent treating its patients. By the end of this, you'll know how a hospital actually gets paid, why filling more beds can make things worse, and why a hospital is not really a medical business at all. Start with what it costs to exist. Hospital construction runs between $440 and $455 per square foot. A general hospital sits higher, $450 to $625. A tertiary trauma center with multiple operating theaters can pass $800. Per bed, that lands between $700,000 and $1.2 million. A 120-bed general hospital costs roughly $112 million to build. That is construction only. No land, no scanners, no staff. Think about that for a second. A single hospital bed can cost more than most American houses, and it has to earn that back while somebody else decides what you are allowed to charge for it. But here's the cost nobody puts in the model. In 35 states and the District of Columbia, you cannot simply build a hospital. You need a certificate of need, a government permission slip. You must prove to a state board that the public actually requires you to exist, and in most of those states, existing hospitals are allowed to take part in that process. Your future competitors get a say in whether you are permitted to open. These rules go back to 1974 when Congress decided the way to control healthcare spending was to limit how much healthcare got built. 11 states have since scrapped them completely. In the other 35, the incumbent gets a vote on the newcomer. So the process is not really a permit application. It is a hearing where the hospital across town explains to a panel why your hospital is unnecessary. So before you buy a single scanner, you have a different problem to solve, not how to treat people, whether you're allowed to. Now, the part that decides everything, you do not set your prices. Follow one patient, she arrives, she is treated, she is discharged. You have a list price for every single thing you did. The industry calls it the charge master. Almost nobody on earth pays it. What you actually receive depends entirely on who is paying. If she carries commercial insurance, you receive a rate you negotiated with her insurer, and that negotiation is the whole ballgame. If she is on Medicare, you receive a fixed federal rate. In 2024, that came to 83 cents for every dollar the care cost you. If she is on Medicaid, it is usually worse. And if she has no insurance at all, you may receive nothing. American hospitals absorbed $41.6 billion of uncompensated care in 2019. And it is moving in the wrong direction. In 2019, Medicare and Medicaid together underpaid hospitals by $75.8 billion. By 2022, that figure was close to $130 billion. Medicare alone accounted for over $100 billion in 2024. In 2019, Medicare covered 87 cents on the dollar. 5 years later, 83. Here is what makes a hospital unlike any other business you could buy. Under federal law, if she walks into your emergency department, you must screen and stabilize her regardless of whether she can pay. Turning her away is not a business decision. It is a federal violation. Picture a restaurant where the government sets the price of half your dishes below what the ingredients cost. Another slice of your diners pay nothing at all, and you are legally forbidden from turning anyone away at the door. Now build that restaurant for $112 million. So the model is not price multiplied by volume, it is volume multiplied by whatever your payers decide you are worth. Which brings us to the number that actually determines whether you survive. Not beds, not surgeons, not reputation. Payer mix. Payer mix is the share of your patients carrying commercial insurance versus government coverage versus nothing at all. Two hospitals can be identical, same size, same equipment, same quality of medicine. One earns money and the other bleeds. The difference is the postcode. This is why the same operation performed by the same surgeon in two hospitals 30 miles apart produces two completely different financial outcomes. Nothing clinical changed. The insurance card did. So which hospitals actually make money? The ones with the right patients, and you do not choose your patients. Then there is labor, which is the largest single line in the building. Salaries and benefits run around 41 to 42% of operating expenses. And here is the reveal that breaks people. Your most expensive nurse is the one who used to work for you. Between 2019 and 2022, the median hourly rate for a contract nurse went from $64 to $132, a 106% increase. Over those same 3 years, your own staff nurses went from $35 an hour to $39. 11%. In 2019, contract nurses were 4.7% of what hospitals spent on nursing. By January 2022, 38.6%. A quarter of hospitals had agency staff consuming more than half of their entire nursing budget. Same beds, same shifts, often the same people. Different badge, and you cannot simply refuse to pay it. If you are 3 nurses short on a Tuesday night, the ward does not run on principle. You pay the agency rate or you close beds you have already built and staffed a building for. Now the story that explains the whole industry. Cerberus Capital Management bought a struggling Catholic hospital chain in Massachusetts and renamed it Steward Healthcare. In 2016, Steward did something that sounds technical and is not. It sold the land and buildings underneath its hospitals to a property company called Medical Properties Trust. $1.2 billion for the real estate, $50 million more in equity, $1.25 billion in total. Cerberus paid itself roughly $800 million out of that transaction and exited the investment in 2020. The hospitals kept operating, but they no longer owned the ground they stood on. They now paid rent permanently on buildings they had owned outright a year earlier. On the 6th of May, 2024, Steward filed for Chapter 11. 31 hospitals across 8 states, more than $9 billion of debt. 8 of them were in Massachusetts, the state where the whole thing started. 5 hospitals closed permanently. Around 2,400 people lost their jobs. 2 more paused services altogether. Kearney Hospital and Neshoba Valley Medical Center shut their doors on the 31st of August 2024. Research since has found that hospitals which do sale-leaseback deals carry a measurably higher risk of closing. The money in that transaction was completely real. It just did not stay in the hospitals. You can extract $1 billion from a hospital exactly once. Here's where it gets uncomfortable because the ways you lose are structural rather than stupid. Mistake 1. Rent you do not control. Once the building is sold, the lease outlives every good year and every bad one. Steward is the case study. It is not the only one. Mistake 2. The wrong payer mix in the wrong place. A hospital serving a community with heavy government coverage and thin commercial insurance is not badly run. It is underpaid by design, and no amount of operational excellence closes that gap. And the risk almost nobody sees coming is this. Your revenue can be rewritten by legislation without a single patient behaving differently. A Medicare rule adjustment, a state Medicaid rate cut, a change in eligibility. Any of those can move your top line by millions. You cannot price around it. You cannot renegotiate it. You read about it. There is one more, and it is the cruelest. Uncompensated care rises exactly when your community needs you most. A recession increases demand and destroys your ability to collect on it at the same moment in the same building. And none of this arrives as a crisis. It arrives as a line item, a rent review, a rate notice in the post, a staffing invoice 40% higher than last month's. Nobody tells you your hospital has stopped working. You work it out from the paperwork. Let's do the actual math, because this is where the brochure falls apart. 120-bed general hospital, $112 million to build. Add land, imaging equipment, licensing, and working capital, and call it $150 million all in. Say it generates $250 million of annual revenue. The optimistic case is 2024. A 4.9% operating margin on that revenue is about $12.25 million. Payback on your $150 million before any debt service sits past 12 years. The realistic case is 2025. Median adjusted operating margin across American hospitals closed that year at 1.3%. On the same $250 million, that is $3.25 million. Payback stretches beyond 40 years. Kaufman Hall, which tracks this monthly across the country, had the median sitting at 1.7% through the middle 7 months of that year. Neither figure is a scandal. Both are simply the middle of the pack. And the reason it fell is worth hearing, because almost none of it is operational. Expenses rose across the board, bad debt went up, charity care went up, the number of uninsured patients went up, and more of the revenue that did arrive came from public payers rather than private ones, which, as we have established, means less of it per dollar of care delivered. Same building, same doctors, same beds, 2 consecutive years. The difference between those two scenarios is roughly $9 million a year, and you did nothing whatsoever to cause either one. Meanwhile, $150 million left in a plain index fund at long-run average returns roughly doubles in a decade. No certificate of need, no agency invoices, no legal obligation to treat whoever walks through the door at 3 in the morning. Step back and the shape of it is clear. You can own the building. You can hire the best surgeons in the state. You can fill every bed you built. None of those 3 things touches the 2 variables that decide whether you make money. A hospital looks like a medical business. What it actually is a fixed cost property and labor operation, legally required to serve customers who cannot pay at prices set by people who do not work for it. Every other business on earth chooses what it charges and who it serves. A hospital does neither and still has to open in the morning, which is why the people who do well in this industry are very rarely the ones who set out to run a hospital. That is not a flaw in the business. That is the business. And yeah, that is it for today. What do you want the next episode be about? Comment down below.